What if the story we tell ourselves about our beginnings, the long linear march from stone tools to starlight, is missing its first and perhaps most important chapter? What if the great grinding amnesia of the Ice Age was not merely a climatic event, but a deliberate erasure? Imagine a civilization, not of stone and steel, but of something far more ephemeral, resonance, biology, or light, flourishing under a colder sun. The glaciers, in their slow, crystalline advance, were not just shapers of landscapes, but cosmic pallbearers, burying a paradigm of existence so completely that its ruins are not cities, but an unnerving silence in our own evolutionary story. This is the ghost that haunts our timeline, a whisper of what might have been, scoured from the Earth's memory by a wall of ice miles high. The silence left behind is a puzzle in itself, a mystery made not of pieces to be assembled, but of the empty spaces where those pieces should be. It's a question that hangs in the cold, thin air of deep time. If you find yourself drawn to these vast, unanswered questions, to the ghosts that haunt our geological timeline, consider subscribing and joining this journey. We are not searching for treasure or lost technologies, but for a deeper understanding of the story of consciousness itself, a story that may be far older and stranger than we have ever dared to imagine. Together, we will listen for the whispers in the ice and contemplate the profound implications of a history that may have been written and then unwritten by the planet itself. Let us travel back in time to a world on the cusp of this great forgetting. The narrative begins approximately 30,000 years ago, as the Earth takes a long, deep sigh into the last glacial maximum. This is not our world. The planet itself wears a different skin. Sea levels are hundreds of feet lower, unveiling immense coastal plains that now lie deep beneath the waves. Continents have different shapes, their edges stretching far out into what is now open ocean. The Mediterranean is a collection of vast, salty lakes, and a grassy, wind-swept steppe called Doggerland serves as a lost bridge between worlds, connecting Britain to mainland Europe. The air is thinner, colder, and carries a different clarity, making the stars in the night sky seem sharper, brighter, and arranged in unfamiliar patterns. This is the world that conventional history populates with our ancestors, small, nomadic bands of Homo sapiens, their existence a fragile and beautiful dance with the elements. They are masters of flint and bone, their consciousness expressed in the breathtaking cave art of Lascaux and Chauvet, a spiritual dialogue with the animal world, a testament to a profound connection with nature. Their lives are governed by the sun, the moon, and the migratory patterns of the great herds of mammoth and woolly rhino. This is the accepted backdrop, a world of resourceful hunter-gatherers, brave and resilient, but technologically primitive. This is the normal against which the anomaly will be set, a world of primal earthly connection, perhaps entirely unaware that it may be sharing the planet with an intelligence operating on a completely different plane of existence. But then, the world begins to change. The central event is not a sudden cataclysm, no fiery asteroid or volcanic explosion. It is a slow, inexorable apocalypse of ice. Over thousands of years, the Laurentid and Fennoscandian ice sheets, walls of frozen water miles high, begin to creep southward. They are a silent white tide, a patient eraser that grinds mountains into dust and obliterates entire ecosystems beneath their crushing weight. This is the great mystery, not the ice itself, but its function. As the glaciers expand and lock the planet's seas into their frozen heart, any civilization that may have existed on those vast, fertile coastal plains is slowly, methodically, and completely obliterated. Their world is simply buried, its memory scraped clean, one grain of rock at a time. The extinction is so total, so geologically perfect, that it leaves behind not ruins, but a void. There are no dramatic battles, no final stands against the encroaching cold. Instead, any structures, whether biological, crystalline, or something else entirely, are pulverized into glacial moraine, their dust scoured across continents. Any knowledge, perhaps stored in patterns of water, magnetic fields, or the very resonance of the Earth, is scrambled and dissipated by the immense pressure and the planetary transformation. The ice does not just conquer, it unmakes.
It dismantles a chapter of history so thoroughly that its absence becomes its only monument, leaving future generations to wonder if the unsettling silence they feel in their own story is just their imagination or the echo of a forgotten scream. The story of our past, as told by science, is a magnificent and humbling epic, carved into stone and written in the layers of the earth. According to this grand narrative, the world of 30,000 years ago was in the grip of a deepening cold. The last glacial maximum was descending, a planetary winter that would reshape continents. We see a landscape of immense ice sheets, some 2 miles thick, grinding their way south from the poles. Sea levels were profoundly lower, exposing vast continental shelves that are now lost beneath the waves.
This was a world of sweeping tundras and steppes, a realm ruled by giants, woolly mammoths, cave lions, and giant deer. It is against this stark, beautiful, and unforgiving backdrop that the accepted story of humanity's late childhood unfolds, a tale of survival and nascent consciousness. In this world of ice and wind, our ancestors, Homo sapiens, were scattered in small, nomadic bands. Their lives, we are told, were a testament to resilience, a delicate and masterful dance with the rhythms of a harsh planet. They were masters of flint and bone, their toolkits growing in sophistication, allowing them to hunt the formidable megafauna that shared their world. Their consciousness, their spirit, found its voice on the hidden walls of caves like Chauvet and Lascaux, where breathtaking paintings depict a world teeming with spiritual power and a deep, reverent connection to the animal kingdom. This is the portrait archaeology has painted for us, a humanity that was resourceful, intelligent, and deeply artistic, yet fundamentally primitive, their horizons defined by the next hunt, the next season, the next migration. Yet this carefully constructed narrative rests upon a foundation that is inherently incomplete. The archaeological record is not a complete book. It is a library where most of the volumes have been burned, and we are left to piece together the story from a few surviving charred pages. Time is the ultimate editor, and its tools are erosion, decay, tectonic shifts, and the simple, relentless turning of planetary cycles. For every miraculously preserved pave painting or flint tool, there are countless other traces that have been washed away, ground to dust, or buried under miles of sediment. We must always remember that we are working with fragments, with the faintest of echoes. This inherent absence in the record is not a failure of science, but a fundamental condition of looking back across such an immense gulf of time. This problem of absence is most pronounced in the very places where an advanced civilization might have first taken root. During the Ice Age, with so much of the world's water locked into glaciers, sea levels were nearly 400 feet lower than they are today. The most temperate, fertile, and resource-rich lands on the planet would have been these exposed coastal plains. These were the prime locations for settlement, for the development of stable communities, and for the birth of complex cultures. Mainstream science readily acknowledges this, studying the drowned landscapes of places like Doggerland in the North Sea. But what this also means is that if any significant chapter of the human story was written there, it now lies inaccessible to us, hidden beneath the crushing weight of the modern oceans. It is from this fragmented record that strange and unsettling anomalies occasionally surface, objects that whisper of a different possibility. These are the so-called out-of-place artifacts, or ooparts, items whose technological sophistication or geological context seems to defy the conventional timeline of human development. Perfectly spherical stones found in Paleolithic layers, evidence of microscopic drilling on ancient bones, or impossibly precise stonework that seems to predate the known tools required to create it. While many of these can be explained as natural formations or misinterpretations, a persistent few remain as genuine enigmas. They are like stray notes in a familiar melody, dissonant chords that suggest the song of our past may be far more complex than the simple tune we have been taught to recognize. This dissonance becomes louder when we consider the dawn of our own recorded history. For hundreds of thousands of years, human progress was a slow, almost imperceptible crawl. Then, around 12,000 years ago, something shifts. The Neolithic Revolution ignites across the globe with astonishing speed. Suddenly, there is agriculture, animal husbandry, pottery, and the construction of monumental architecture by societies that just a few generations earlier were supposedly simple hunter-gatherers. This sudden, explosive leap in complexity is one of the great puzzles of our past. Was it truly a spontaneous invention, a cognitive spark that caught fire everywhere at once? Or was it something else? Perhaps the rediscovery of a lost inheritance,
a body of knowledge that had survived the Great Forgetting, waiting for the long winter to end. Nowhere is this puzzle more tangible than at a site in modern-day Turkey called Göbekli Tepe. Dated to nearly 12,000 years ago, it is a vast complex of massive, intricately carved stone pillars arranged in circles. It is a temple, a celestial observatory, a feat of sophisticated engineering and social organization that predates the invention of agriculture, writing, and even pottery by millennia. It was built by people we have long defined as simple hunter-gatherers, a fact that fundamentally challenges the linear story of progress. Göbekli Tepe is not just a ruin, it is a paradox made of stone. It stands as a silent testament to the possibility that our ancestors possessed a depth of knowledge and a capacity for grand, coordinated projects far earlier than we ever imagined, hinting at a missing developmental stage in our story. The mystery extends beyond stone and soil, reaching into the very code of our existence. The human genome is an ancient archive, a biological library carrying the history of our species.
Within our DNA are vast sequences whose function remains unknown, sometimes referred to as junk DNA. There are also genetic bottlenecks in our deep past, moments where our population was reduced to a few thousand individuals, and strange markers that defy easy explanation. Could these genetic ghosts be another repository of clues? This is not to suggest wild fantasies, but to ask a simple, profound question. If a lost chapter of humanity existed, would its only traces be in the external world? Or might our very biology carry a faint molecular echo of a forgotten ancestry, a history written not in stone, but in the subtle grammar of life itself? When we turn from science to story, we find this same echo reverberating through the ages. Nearly every culture on Earth, from the ancient Sumerians to the indigenous peoples of the Americas, possesses a foundational myth of a great flood. These are stories of a cataclysm that wiped out a prior world, a golden age of powerful ancestors or gods, leaving only a few survivors to begin anew. While myth is not history, the sheer universality of this narrative is haunting. Geologists confirm that the end of the Ice Age triggered catastrophic melting and a rapid sea level rise of hundreds of feet. Could these ancient myths be a form of cultural memory? A distorted but persistent echo of a very real planet-altering trauma that submerged entire coastlines and the worlds that may have existed upon them? All of these threads, the gaps in the record, the anomalous artifacts, the explosion of civilization, and the persistent myths, begin to weave a new tapestry of questions. The established narrative of our past is a powerful one, placing us at the apex of a linear climb from primitive beginnings to modern sophistication. It's a story of being the first, the only technologically advanced intelligence to arise on this planet. But what if that story, as comforting as it is built upon an assumption of completeness that the evidence itself does not fully support? What does it do to our sense of self, to our place in the cosmos, if we are not the beginning of the story, but merely the latest chapter, living in a world that has forgotten its own preface? We are left, then, standing at the edge of a great silence. On one side is the solid ground of what we know, the carefully assembled facts of geology and archaeology that provide a framework for our past. On the other side is a vast ocean of the unknown, an abyss of deep time from which strange and tantalizing clues occasionally wash ashore. The submerged coastlines, the out-of-place artifacts, the sudden dawn of civilization, these are the whispers that haunt the edges of our knowledge. The question we must now confront is whether these are simply isolated puzzles to be solved within our existing models, or if they are the scattered footprints of a ghost, a presence so vast and so completely erased that its only remaining monument is the unnerving silence it left behind. Let us begin by looking not at a map of the world as it is, but as it was. Imagine peeling back the blue of our modern oceans, letting the water recede like a slow exhaling tide. What is revealed is not a void, but a lost continent of coastlines, a world of immense, fertile plains that once connected lands now separated by seas. The North Sea hides Doggerland, a vast and temperate landscape that was the heartland of Stone Age Europe, a bridge of life between Britain and the continent. To the east, Sundaland connected the islands of Indonesia into a single massive landmass, a tropical cradle of biodiversity. These were not barren shelves. They were the most resource-rich, ecologically vibrant, and desirable territories on the entire planet. They were the natural home for any burgeoning civilization, the prime real estate of the Pleistocene world. The sheer scale of this lost territory is difficult to comprehend. We speak of an area larger than Western Europe, simply gone. Geologists and marine archaeologists map these drowned landscapes with sonar, sending sound waves into the deep to sketch the faint outlines of ancient riverbeds, hills, and coastlines.
But this is like trying to read the pages of a book through 100 meters of water and 10,000 years of silt. We see the ghost of a landscape, but the life that filled it, the stories it held, and the structures it may have supported remain almost entirely invisible to us. The ocean is a patient keeper of secrets, and it has guarded this particular secret so well that we have only just begun to realize the magnitude of what we have lost and what we might be missing from our own story. What might we find if we could truly see? If we could drain the oceans and walk these lost plains, would we find only the scattered hearths and flint tools of nomadic hunters, or would we find something more? This is where the line between known fact and reasoned speculation begins to blur. We know these lands existed. We know they were inhabited. We know they were the most likely place for humanity to take its first great steps towards complexity. The fundamental question then is not whether people lived there, but whether the story of what they built has been so completely submerged, so thoroughly erased, that our entire understanding of the ancient world is based only on the surviving hinterlands, the mountainous leftovers of a much grander stage.
This question of submerged worlds is not confined to the realm of theory. Off the coast of Japan, near the island of Yonaguni, lies a massive underwater rock formation that has sparked decades of intense debate. It features enormous terraced blocks with seemingly flat faces, sharp corners, and what appear to be carved steps. Geologists argue it is a natural formation, the result of tectonic activity and erosion on sandstone beds. Yet to many observers, the structure appears unnervingly artificial, a sunken monument from a forgotten age. Whether natural or man-made, Yonaguni serves as a powerful symbol. It represents the profound ambiguity of our deep past, a place where the lines between geology and archaeology dissolve, leaving us with a stone riddle resting silently in the deep blue. A similar enigma lies half a world away in the Gulf of Khambhat, off the coast of India. In 2002, sonar surveys revealed what appeared to be the submerged ruins of a vast city, stretching for miles along an ancient riverbed nearly 120 feet below the surface. Artifacts dredged from the site, including pieces of wood, pottery, and human remains, were dated to as far back as 9,500 years ago, thousands of years before the earliest known cities in the region. The discovery remains controversial, with debates raging over the accuracy of the dates and the interpretation of the sonar images. Yet, like Yonaguni, it plants a seed of profound doubt. It asks us to consider that the story of urbanism, the story of civilization itself, might have a submerged prologue we are only just beginning to detect. These potential underwater sites force us to confront the limits of our own perspective. Our history of the ancient world has been written, by necessity, on dry land. We have studied the pyramids of the desert, the temples of the jungle, and the fortresses of the mountains. But what if this is like trying to understand the full story of a great empire by only studying its remote provincial outposts? What if the true capitals, the vibrant centers of innovation, culture, and power, all now lie in a realm that has been inaccessible to us for 10 millennia? These submerged anomalies are not proof of a lost civilization, but they are a powerful and persistent invitation to wonder, to look beyond the shorelines of our accepted history. The mystery deepens when we return to dry land and examine the stonework left behind by our ancestors. Consider Pumapunku in the highlands of Bolivia, a field of impossibly precise stone blocks scattered across a windswept plateau. The H blocks are cut from diorite and andesite, some of the hardest stone on Earth, with a precision that seems to defy the capabilities of a Stone Age or Bronze Age culture. We see perfectly straight edges, razor-sharp interior corners, and surfaces polished to a mirror-like finish. Archaeologists suggest these were made with simple stone hammers and sand abrasives, but the sheer perfection and scale of the work challenge the imagination. It feels less like construction and more like manufacturing, a product of a technology whose principles we no longer fully grasp. This same unnerving precision is found in Egypt, not just in the Great Pyramid, but in the granite boxes of the Serapeum of Saqqara. Here, deep beneath the ground, lie more than 20 massive sarcophagi, each carved from a single block of granite and weighing up to 100 tons. Their lids alone weigh over 30 tons. Not only is the stone impossibly hard, but the interior surfaces are cut with such perfect flatness and right angles that modern machinists would struggle to replicate them today. How were these boxes quarried, transported for hundreds of miles, lowered into a narrow subterranean tunnel, and finished with such incredible accuracy? The official explanations feel inadequate, leaving a void where a clear technological lineage should be.
it is another whisper of a lost science. These examples of megalithic and precision engineering are not isolated curiosities, they are a global phenomenon. From the polygonal walls of Sacsayhuaman in Peru, where immense stones fit together without mortar like pieces of a puzzle, to the ancient temples of Malta, the pattern repeats. We see evidence of a profound understanding of geometry, logistics, and material science that seems to emerge from nowhere, fully formed, and then often declines over time. The later constructions are frequently cruder copies of the earlier, more sophisticated work. This suggests not a linear progression of skill, but perhaps the inheritance of a decaying tradition, a body of knowledge whose source has been forgotten, a science that was being remembered rather than invented. Alongside this mastery of stone was an equally profound mastery of the sky. The alignment of ancient structures with celestial events is too precise and too widespread to be a coincidence. The Great Pyramid is aligned to true north with an accuracy that is astonishing even by modern standards. Stonehenge acts as a complex solar and lunar calendar capable of predicting eclipses. The Temple of Karnak in Egypt was built to align with the winter solstice sunrise, creating a breathtaking spectacle of light and shadow. These were not just temples, they were astronomical instruments, stone observatories designed to lock humanity's place into the grand, cyclical rhythms of the cosmos.
They reflect a worldview where heaven and earth were not separate, but intimately and mathematically connected. This celestial dialogue is perhaps most stunningly expressed at Göbekli Tepe. The central pillars of its oldest enclosures feature carvings of animals that some researchers have correlated with constellations in the night sky. One pillar, known as the Vulture Stone, may even depict a map of the sky from nearly 13,000 years ago, commemorating a specific cataclysmic event, perhaps a comet impact. If this interpretation is correct, it means that people we have long considered primitive hunter-gatherers were not only tracking the slow precession of the equinoxes, a cycle that takes nearly 26,000 years to complete, but were recording their observations in stone for future generations. It implies a continuity of knowledge and a sense of time that is utterly alien to our model of the prehistoric mind. What does this deep astronomical knowledge truly represent? Was it developed independently by dozens of disconnected cultures all around the globe? Or does it point to a shared common ancestor for this sacred science, a single source of knowledge that was fractured and scattered after some great cataclysm, with its fragments preserved in the myths and monuments of the survivors? This is the core of the inheritance hypothesis, the idea that the cultures of our recorded history were not inventing agriculture, astronomy, and architecture from scratch, but were rediscovering and reinterpreting the faint, powerful echoes of a science that had belonged to a world that came before, a world that understood the music of the spheres and carved it into the very bones of the earth. Findings like this remind us how little we truly know. If you're fascinated by these missing pieces of history, subscribing will keep you close to the next revelation. Each unanswered question about these ancient sites, from their construction to their cosmic alignments, peels back one layer of our assumptions, only to reveal a deeper mystery lying beneath. It is a journey not into answers, but into a more profound and resonant state of questioning, a state of wonder that forces us to reconsider the very foundations of the story we tell ourselves about who we are and where we come from, challenging us to listen for the faint harmonies of a forgotten age. Let us turn now to the very foundation of our own civilization, the invention of agriculture. The standard narrative depicts this as a slow, gradual process of discovery, where hunter-gatherers over many generations learned to cultivate wild grasses. Yet the genetic evidence tells a slightly different story. Key staple crops like wheat, barley, and rice appear to have been domesticated with remarkable speed. Their wild ancestors transformed into reliable food sources in a relatively short period. It raises a fascinating question. Was this process one of pure, unguided discovery, a series of fortunate accidents? Or was it guided by a pre-existing body of knowledge, a template for cultivation that allowed for such a rapid and successful transition? The same abruptness characterizes the birth of writing. In Mesopotamia, the Sumerian cuneiform script emerges not as a series of primitive pictographs that slowly evolve, but as a fully formed, complex system capable of recording laws, literature, and astronomical observations. A similar explosion of complexity occurs with Egyptian hieroglyphs. There are very few intermediate steps in the archaeological record. It is as if the concept of writing in all its sophistication was downloaded into the culture rather than developed over millennia. Where did this sudden cognitive leap come from? Why does it appear in such a developed state, as if the architects of these systems already knew exactly what they were building from the very beginning?
These sudden flowerings of complexity in agriculture, architecture, astronomy, and writing, all happening around the same time after the end of the last ice age, paint a curious picture. It looks less like a slow linear ascent and more like a recovery, a renaissance. It is the pattern of a world rebuilding itself after a devastating collapse, using the fragmented knowledge that survived the cataclysm. It suggests that the true dawn of civilization may not have been in Sumeria around 3500 BC, but thousands of years earlier on a landscape that is now lost to us, and that our own history is but the second draft of a much older story. The clues to this older story may not only be buried in stone and soil, but also within us, encoded in the very fabric of our being. The human genome is an ancient and sprawling library, containing some 3 billion letters of genetic code. For decades, vast stretches of this code were dismissed as junk DNA, evolutionary leftovers with no apparent function. We are now discovering that this is far from the truth. This genetic dark matter plays a crucial role in regulating how our genes are expressed, acting as a complex control system. But its origins and the full extent of its information content remain one of the greatest mysteries in biology. Within these non-coding regions of our DNA, scientists have found ancient viral DNA, the fossilized remnants of infections that afflicted our distant ancestors. These sequences were inserted into our genome and have been carried along for the ride ever since.
This raises a speculative but profound question. If a virus can write its code into our biology, could a highly advanced intelligence do the same? Could there be information, a message, or even a functional program hidden within the vast, unexplored territories of our own genome? A legacy left not in stone, but in the living code of every human being on the planet, waiting for a time when we were advanced enough to read it. This is not a question science is currently equipped to answer, but it reframes our own biology as an archaeological site of immense antiquity. We carry within ourselves a history book that stretches back millions of years. We know that our species has gone through several dramatic population bottlenecks in the deep past, moments when our numbers dwindled to only a few thousand individuals. What pressures caused these near extinctions, and what genetic information was lost, or perhaps gained, during these critical periods? The ghost in the ice may have a corresponding ghost in our genes, a faint signal in the noise of our evolutionary history, a whisper of an engineered past. Finally, let us return to the skin of the Earth itself and the scars it bears. All across the world, from Scotland to India, we find the remains of vitrified forts. These are ancient stone structures whose walls have been subjected to such intense heat that the rock has melted and fused into a black, glassy substance. The temperatures required to achieve this are estimated to be over 1100 degrees Celsius, far hotter than what can be produced by a simple bonfire. Mainstream archaeology struggles to explain them, suggesting they were deliberately set ablaze in acts of ritual or warfare. But how such sustained, intense heat was generated remains a subject of fierce debate. In the Libyan desert and other locations, we find fields of pure yellow-green silica glass scattered across the sand. Known as Libyan desert glass, its origin is another deep puzzle. The leading theory is that it was formed by the heat of a massive meteorite airburst millions of years ago. Yet the glass is unusually pure, and some have questioned whether any natural event could produce it. These geological anomalies, these patches of melted earth and fused stone, serve as a final haunting question. Are they all the result of known natural forces like lightning, volcanoes, and meteor impacts? Or could some of them be the faint geological scars of a forgotten age? These scars, if that is what they are, would be the final, faintest traces of the ghost civilization. Their cities ground to dust by the ice, their coastlines drowned by the rising seas, their knowledge fragmented into the myths and monuments of their successors, their very memory perhaps encoded as a whisper in our DNA. And finally, the evidence of their power or their destruction written as a glassy scar upon the surface of the planet itself. The Earth is a master of recycling its own history, of healing its own wounds. The great ice sheets were the most effective tool of erasure, but perhaps not the only one, leaving us to wonder what other histories, what other truths lie buried just beneath our feet. To search for this lost world is not to dig for a city of gold or a buried temple. It is to search for a ghost, not a spirit of the dead, but a ghost in the machine of our own history, an echo in the architecture of our world. The evidence is not a grand monument, but a pattern of subtle impossibilities, a collection of whispers that, when heard together, begin to sound like a forgotten voice.
We are not looking for the source of the sound, but for the faint, resonant vibrations it left behind in the objects and ideas of the cultures that came after, the inheritors of a shattered legacy. These are not just artifacts, they are the scattered fossils of a different kind of thinking, the last remnants of a science that worked with principles we are only just beginning to rediscover. Imagine history not as a straight line, but as a vast, ancient tapestry. For millennia, countless hands have woven their threads into its design, creating the rich and complex picture we study today. But in certain places, the threads are frayed, or they seem to appear from nowhere, with no connection to the patterns around them. There are knots of impossible complexity, and long stretches where the original design has been torn away completely, leaving only a void. These anomalies, these out-of-place artifacts, are those strange threads. They are the clues that suggest the tapestry we see is not the original, but a repair, a new story woven over the ghostly outline of a much older, much grander design. Consider the Antikythera mechanism, a device recovered from an ancient shipwreck off the coast of Greece. It is a clockwork computer of breathtaking complexity, an intricate assembly of bronze gears and dials designed to predict the movements of the sun, the moon, and the planets. Dated to the 2nd century BC, its sophistication would not be seen again on Earth for more than 1,000 years. It stands as a profound technological orphan, a piece of machinery that seems to have fallen out of a different timeline, a testament to a level of understanding that simply should not have existed then.
The true mystery of the Antikythera mechanism is not just its existence, but its solitude. Where are its predecessors? Where are the simpler devices that must have led to its creation? And where is the technological tradition that followed it? The knowledge seems to have vanished as quickly as it appeared, leaving no clear descendants. It is like finding a perfectly functioning laptop computer in a medieval monastery. One could marvel at the object itself, but the deeper question would be about the entire system it implies. The electricity, the manufacturing, the software, all of which are completely absent. The mechanism is a beautiful, intricate gear, but the machine it belonged to is missing. Half a world away, buried in the sands of what is now Iraq, another quiet anomaly was unearthed. Known as the Baghdad Battery, it is a simple clay pot containing a copper cylinder and an iron rod. When filled with an acidic liquid like vinegar or grape juice, this humble assembly can generate a small but steady electrical current. While its purpose remains a mystery, with theories ranging from electroplating gold onto silver to a form of ritualistic magic, its existence hints at a forgotten chapter in the history of energy. It is a whisper of electrochemistry, a faint spark of a principle that would not be formally discovered by mainstream science for another 18 centuries, a tiny key to a door we never knew was locked. These artifacts are not loud declarations, they are quiet suggestions. They force us to imagine our history not as a dark room that is slowly being illuminated by the steady flame of progress, but as a vast, cavernous space that was once fully lit. The lights went out, plunging the world into darkness, and for millennia we have been wandering through this space with a single flickering candle. The things we find, a gear, a battery, a strange carving, are objects we briefly glimpse in the faint light, remnants of a time when the entire room was bathed in a brilliance we can no longer comprehend. We are not the bringers of the light. We are the children of a long and profound darkness, trying to remember what it was like to see. Nowhere is this sense of a forgotten vision more potent than in the maps of the ancient world. The Peary Race Map, compiled in 1513 from a collection of much older source charts, is a cartographic enigma. It depicts the coastlines of South America and Africa with an accuracy that seems impossible for its time. But its most haunting feature is what it shows at the very bottom of the world, a landmass that strongly resembles the coast of Antarctica, but depicted without its thick mantle of ice. To map the subglacial coastline of Antarctica would require a technology that we have only possessed for less than a century, or it would require a map drawn before the continent was covered in ice, more than 10,000 years ago. The map is a paradox. It is a document that seems to hold a memory of a different Earth, a world with a different climate and a different geography. It is a ghost of a landscape, preserved on parchment. Could it be that the source maps used by Peary Race were the last surviving fragments of a global mapping project from a forgotten age? A project undertaken by a civilization that knew the true shape of the world long before the great ice sheets descended to bury their coastlines and their knowledge.
It is a single piece of paper that challenges the entire timeline of exploration and discovery, suggesting that we were not the first to know our world, but merely the first to forget. What seems like an anomaly today may be the key to rewriting the story of civilization. If you'd like to stay with us as we search for those keys, subscribe to the channel. Each of these strange maps, these impossible machines, is a loose thread. If we pull on it, we may find that the entire tapestry of our accepted history begins to unravel, revealing the faint but persistent outline of a world that came before, a world whose final message may be a warning about the fragility of memory and the cyclical nature of time itself. The journey is not about finding answers, but about learning to ask more profound and unsettling questions about the ground beneath our feet. This pattern of forgotten knowledge extends beyond mechanics and maps into the very symbols left behind by ancient cultures. In the Temple of Hathor at Dendera, Egypt, a series of stone reliefs depict a curious scene. A large, bulbous object resembling a giant glass lamp contains a long, undulating snake. This bulb is attached by a thick cable to a rectangular box, and figures are shown holding it aloft. To a conventional Egyptologist, this is a beautiful and complex mythological symbol, representing the birth of a deity from a lotus flower. It is a story told in the language of myth, a purely spiritual concept rendered in stone for the faithful to see. Yet, to an engineer, the Dendera relief looks uncannily like a schematic diagram for a massive electrical device, perhaps a Crookes tube or some other form of cathode ray lamp. The bulb, the filament, the cable, and the power source are all there. This creates a fascinating tension. Is it a metaphor or is it a blueprint? Or could it be both? Perhaps the science of a lost age was so profound that it became indistinguishable from magic and spirituality to the cultures that inherited its fragmented remnants.
They may have preserved the technical images without understanding the science behind them, turning a schematic into a scripture, a machine into a god. This ambiguity between toy and technology appears again in a small, unassuming object discovered in a tomb at Saqqara, Egypt. Known as the Saqqara bird, it is a small model carved from sycamore wood. At first glance, it looks like a simple figurine of a falcon, but upon closer inspection, its features are not those of a bird, but of a modern aircraft. Its wings are shaped with a distinct aerodynamic profile, and unlike any bird, it possesses a vertical tail fin, a feature essential for stable flight. Tests on replicas have shown that the design is a highly efficient glider. It is a whisper of aerodynamics, a hint of a grasp of the principles of flight, thousands of years before the Wright brothers. Was this simply a clever toy for a child, a whimsical carving with no deeper meaning? Or was it a scale model, a miniature representation of a much larger functional machine? Like so many of these anomalies, it sits on the knife's edge of possibility, a silent object that refuses to give up its secrets. It is a tiny wooden question mark. It asks us to consider whether the dream of flight is a modern invention, or if it is a recurring dream, an ancient memory that has haunted humanity for millennia, a faint echo of a time when our ancestors may have truly slipped the surly bonds of Earth. These artifacts, when viewed together, begin to feel like words from a forgotten language. We can analyze their physical properties, their chemical composition, their shape, and their weight, but we have lost the grammar, the syntax, the cultural context that would allow us to understand their true meaning. We are like literary scholars trying to reconstruct a lost epic poem from a handful of surviving disconnected words. We see a gear, a battery, a map, a glider. We can define the individual pieces, but we cannot hear the story they were once meant to tell. The sentence has been broken, and the silence that remains is where the deepest mystery lies. The trail of anomalies does not end with physical objects. It extends into the very architecture of the ancient world, particularly in the use of sound. Sites like the Hypogeum of Halseflioni in Malta, a subterranean temple carved from solid limestone, appear to have been engineered as powerful acoustic instruments. Certain chambers within the complex are tuned to resonate at a specific frequency, around 110 Hz. When a deep male voice chants at this frequency, the sound is amplified and seems to fill the entire space, creating a profound and disorienting sensory experience for anyone within. This was not an accident of construction, it was deliberate sonic engineering. What was the purpose of this deep, resonant frequency? Was it designed to facilitate religious ritual, to create a sense of awe, or to alter the state of human consciousness?
Modern research has shown that prolonged exposure to such frequencies can have a direct impact on brain activity, encouraging a shift from the logical left brain to the more creative and intuitive right brain. Was this an ancient form of neurotechnology, a tool for exploring the inner landscapes of the mind? Or was it a remnant of a much more practical science, a technology based on the power of vibration, frequency, and resonance? This idea of a lost science of resonance connects directly back to our central premise, a civilization not of stone and steel, but of something far more subtle. Perhaps their greatest achievements were not in building towering structures, but in understanding and manipulating the invisible forces of the natural world. Their technology may have been based on harmonizing with the Earth's own energetic fields, using sound to levitate stone, to heal the body, or to communicate over vast distances. The great stone circles and resonant chambers they left behind may be the last decaying remnants of this vibrational technology, their primary function now lost to us. Let us use a modern analogy. Imagine a future archaeologist, thousands of years from now, digging through the ruins of our own civilization. They find a single inert smartphone. Without any understanding of electricity, microchips, or wireless communication, they would be utterly baffled. They might conclude it was a decorative black stone, a ritual object, or a child's toy. They would see the physical object, but they would be entirely blind to the immense invisible universe of information and function that it once represented. Are we making this same fundamental mistake when we look at the artifacts of the deep past? The most telling clue may not be the anomalies themselves, but the pattern of their appearance and disappearance. They do not follow a neat, linear progression of development. Instead, they erupt into the historical record, often fully formed, with no clear origin. And then the knowledge behind them seems to fade away for centuries or even millennia. The perfect stonework of the Andean highlands gives way to the cruder masonry of the Inca. The genius of the Antikythera mechanism vanishes from the Greek world. This is not the signature of invention and gradual improvement. It is the signature of inheritance, of a legacy being imperfectly remembered and slowly forgotten.
Think of it as a great global library of knowledge that was destroyed in a cataclysm, the slow, grinding cataclysm of the Ice Age. The survivors, scattered and traumatized, managed to save only a few random, disconnected pages from the fire. One group saved a page on astronomy, another on metallurgy, a third on agriculture, a fourth on cartography. Over the ensuing millennia, they tried to rebuild their world from these precious, tattered fragments. But the core knowledge, the unifying theories that connected all of these disparate fields, was gone. Our entire history may be the story of humanity trying to rewrite a book whose first and most important chapter was turned to ash. Ultimately, these anomalies are not proof of anything. They are invitations. They invite us to be humble, to recognize the profound gaps in our knowledge, and to question the comforting certainty of our own historical narrative. They are the dissonant chords in the song of our past, beautiful and unsettling notes that remind us that the melody we hear today may be only a simplified version of a much grander, more complex symphony, a symphony whose original score was lost to the great cold silence, its music now only faintly audible in the whispers of stone, the ghosts of drowned coastlines, and the impossible precision of a forgotten machine. Faced with this profound and unsettling silence, we are left with only the faint outlines of possibility, the speculative ghosts that rise from the gaps in our knowledge. If a chapter of our story was so completely erased, what might it have contained? We must now step away from the solid ground of scattered artifacts and into the mist of reasoned hypothesis. Let us imagine for a moment 3 different paths that could lead to the same unnerving silence. Each path offers a different lens through which to view our past, and each one changes the very definition of who we are. They are not answers, but grand and haunting questions, each one a potential key to understanding the ghost in the ice, a phantom that may have been our ancestor, our creator, or even a reflection of ourselves. The first and perhaps most intimate possibility is that this was a civilization of our own blood, a human civilization, but one that took a profoundly different path. Let us call them the mother culture. This was not an empire of conquest in stone, but a global, interconnected network of coastal communities, living in symbiotic harmony with the planet's oceans. Their world was defined not by borders, but by currents, not by monuments, but by the rhythms of the tides. They would have been master navigators, their understanding of the sea and the stars so complete that the entire globe was their home.
Their legacy was not meant to be written in stone for future ages, but lived in a continuous, flowing present, a dance with the planet that was as beautiful and as ephemeral as a wave. The technology of this mother culture would have been almost invisible to us, for it was not a technology of machines, but of life itself. Imagine a mastery of biology and genetics that allowed them to grow their structures, to create living ships from coral and wood, and to communicate through vast subterranean fungal networks. Their understanding of sound and resonance may have been their primary tool, allowing them to shape stone, heal the body, and interact with the Earth's own electromagnetic field. This would be a civilization whose greatest achievements were not pyramids, but perfectly balanced ecosystems, not weapons, but a deep, resonant dialogue with the planetary consciousness. Their ruins are not cities, because their cities were alive, and like all living things, they have long since returned to the soil and the sea. Their relationship with the earth would have been that of a gardener to a garden, not a miner to a resource. They would have seen consciousness in all things, in the rocks, the water, the air, and their science would have been a form of communication with these other intelligences. They might have practiced a form of geological acupuncture, placing megalithic structures at key energetic nodes on the planet's surface to maintain its balance and health. The stone circles and dolmens that dot our world may be the last decaying remnants of this global system, their original purpose forgotten, their resonant circuits long gone cold. We see them as temples or tombs, but perhaps they were once vital organs in a living, planetary-scale machine designed to sustain life, not just for humanity, but for the Earth itself. The very source of their strength was also their greatest vulnerability. Their civilization was almost exclusively coastal, thriving on the immense, fertile plains now lost beneath the waves. The ocean was their highway, their library, and their source of life. When the planet's climate began to shift and the great ice sheets started to grow, their world was the first to disappear. The slow, inexorable advance of the glaciers and the corresponding fall in sea level was not a sudden cataclysm they could fight, but a slow, geological dismantling of their entire reality. Their knowledge systems, perhaps tied to specific coastal locations and planetary frequencies, were methodically scrambled and erased. They were not conquered. Their world was simply, patiently, unmade by the planet they had so carefully tended. Who then were the survivors?
Not the kings, priests, or scientists from the heart of their culture, for those centers were the first to be submerged or crushed by ice. The survivors were likely small, isolated groups from the hinterlands, the mountainous regions that were spared the worst of the erasure. These scattered communities, traumatized and disconnected from the source of their knowledge, became the culture bearers of a shattered legacy. They held on to fragments of the old wisdom, a piece of astronomy, a technique for building with massive stones, a memory of agriculture, but the grand, unifying theory that connected it all was lost forever. They were the keepers of a few precious, disconnected pages from a library that had been burned to the ground. These fragments of knowledge are what we now see as the Neolithic Revolution. The sudden explosion of agriculture, megalithic construction, and sophisticated astronomical knowledge after the Ice Age was not a new invention, but a desperate act of remembering. Sites like Göbekli Tepe can be seen in this light, not as the world's first temple, but as a memory palace, an encyclopedia in stone, built by the survivors to preserve what little they could of the drowned world's wisdom for future generations. They carved the celestial alignments and the animal symbols not just as art, but a desperate message, a final attempt to transmit a warning and a blessing from a world that had vanished beneath the ice and waves, a haunting echo of a forgotten song. We can understand this process through the modern analogy of a cargo cult. After their contact with advanced technology, some island cultures built wicker airplanes and mock runways, perfectly replicating the external forms of what they had seen without any understanding of the internal combustion engine or the principles of aerodynamics. In the same way, the post-Ice Age cultures may have built stone circles and aligned monoliths, copying the sacred forms of their ancestors' resonant technology, but the knowledge of how to activate them, how to make them sing, was gone. They were performing a ritual based on the faint memory of a science they could no longer comprehend, turning a functional machine into an object of religious worship, a tool into a totem. The emotional legacy of this great forgetting may be the most profound trace of all. The near-universal myths of a golden age, a time when humanity lived in harmony with the gods and the earth,
followed by a great flood that destroyed that paradise, may not be mere stories. They could be a form of species-level post-traumatic stress, a deep cellular memory of a very real historical trauma. The ache of this loss resonates through our oldest scriptures and legends, a persistent sense of a paradise lost, of a fall from grace. We look back at a mythical Eden, but perhaps we are simply remembering the very real sun-drenched coastlines of a world that now lies in a cold, dark, watery grave. But what if the ghost in our history is not human at all? Let us explore a second, more unsettling path. What if the anomalies of our deep past are not the footprints of a lost human civilization, but the traces of an external presence? This hypothesis suggests that Earth has been visited, or perhaps even managed, by a non-human intelligence for millennia. This was not an invasion or a conquest, but something far more subtle and profound. Imagine them not as visitors, but as watchers, as cosmic gardeners tending to a promising world, observing the slow, delicate evolution of life and consciousness from a discrete distance, their presence almost entirely undetectable. Their interaction with our world would have been governed by a principle of minimal interference. They would not have landed spaceships on every continent or announced their presence to our primitive ancestors. Instead, their influence would have been subtle, a gentle nudge here and there over vast spans of time. The sudden cognitive leap that led to Homo sapiens, the unexplained sophistication in our genetic code, the very spark of self-awareness, could these have been the result of a deliberate, carefully guided intervention? Perhaps we are not just a product of natural selection, but also of a quiet, patient, and impossibly ancient program of celestial husbandry designed to cultivate a species capable of one day joining a galactic community. The technology of these watchers would be indistinguishable from nature itself because they would wield the fundamental forces of the universe as their tools. They would not build with steel and concrete. They might grow crystalline communication hubs deep within the Earth's crust, manipulate weather patterns as a form of terraforming, or use controlled geological forces to shape the landscape to their needs. From this perspective, anomalies like vitrified forts or fields of desert glass are not the weapons of a lost human war, but the accidental byproducts of their activities, the faint industrial scars left behind by a technology so advanced that it appears to us as a series of inexplicable geological and mythological events. Within this framework, the Ice Age itself takes on a new and ominous meaning. It may not have been a random climatic event, but a deliberate action. Perhaps it was a planetary quarantine, a way to isolate a dangerous mutation in their experiment.
Or maybe it was a sterilization protocol, a great winter designed to wipe the slate clean after a project had failed or run its course. It could even have been a consequence of their departure, the planetary systems they maintained falling into chaos once they left, like a complex garden collapsing into wilderness after the gardeners have gone. The great ice sheets were not a natural process, but the closing of a celestial laboratory's doors. This reframes the discovery in the Antarctic ice core. The complex xenon isotopes and self-repairing polymers are not a message from a dying human civilization, but a final, deliberate data packet left behind by the departing watchers. It is a time capsule, a message in a bottle placed carefully in the geological strata to be found only when their subject, humanity, had developed the technology to read it. It is the ultimate parting gift, or the ultimate warning. It is not a story of our past, but a key to our future, a single indelible sentence left in the planetary archive by the beings who may have set our entire story in motion. What could such a message contain? It would likely not be a history of their civilization or a greeting from the stars. It might be something far more practical and profound. It could be a user's manual for the planet, a guide to the subtle energetic systems that the Watchers once maintained. It could be a genetic key, a piece of code designed to activate the dormant potential they placed within our own DNA, unlocking new capacities for consciousness and understanding. Or it could be a simple, stark warning about a cyclical threat, a galactic danger that they could no longer shield us from, a final piece of advice before leaving their children to face the universe alone. This hypothesis resonates powerfully with our most ancient and universal myths, the stories of gods descending from the heavens, the Anunnaki in Sumeria, the shining ones of global folklore,
who taught humanity the arts of civilization, writing, and astronomy, take on a new light. These are not just allegories for the forces of nature. They may be the distorted, mythologized memories of a very real, non-human presence. Our ancestors did not invent gods to explain the world. They created myths to explain the very real, technologically advanced beings who walked among them, beings whose science was so far beyond their comprehension that it could only be described as magic. The philosophical impact of this model is staggering. It removes the burden of a lost golden age from human shoulders, but it replaces it with a profound sense of cosmic childhood. We are not a species that has fallen from grace, but one that is still growing into a destiny that was planned for us. Our entire history is not a story of our own making, but the curriculum of a school we never knew we were attending. Our sense of loneliness in the universe would be replaced by the daunting realization that we have been observed all along, and that we may now be approaching our final exam, a test set for us by the silent, patient watchers of the stars. There is a third path, however, one that synthesizes the first two into a grander, more impersonal vision. This is the cyclical model, which posits that the rise and fall of advanced civilizations on Earth is not an accident or an anomaly, but a fundamental, repeating pattern. The ghost in the ice was not the first, and we will not be the last. History is not a line or a ladder, but a great wheel, and the Earth itself is the engine that turns it. The planet has its own deep rhythms, its own cycles of creation and destruction, and civilizations are merely the temporary flowers that bloom in its long summer seasons. In this vision, the great glacial cycles are the planet's primary reset mechanism. They are the great winters that periodically scour the surface clean, grinding civilizations to dust, submerging their coastlines, and allowing the planetary consciousness to begin a new experiment. Each cycle may produce a fundamentally different kind of civilization. One cycle, the one that came before ours, might have mastered resonance and biology. Our own cycle is defined by fire, industry, and information. The next might explore dimensions of consciousness we cannot yet imagine. Each is a unique expression of the Earth's potential, a temporary thought in the mind of a geological deity. The mechanism of collapse is built into the system and is not always ice. It could be a periodic magnetic pole shift that wipes clean all electromagnetic memory. It could be a recurring solar flare cycle that scours the surface with radiation. Or it could be that every civilization, upon reaching a certain technological threshold, inevitably triggers its own demise, either through self-destruction or by transcending the physical plane entirely. The ghost civilization did not fail. It simply reached the end of its allotted time in the sun. Its disappearance was not a tragedy, but the natural, inevitable turning of the great wheel, as autumn gives way to winter. In this model, knowledge is never truly lost. It's simply submerged. When a civilization collapses, its wisdom and experiences are absorbed back into the collective unconscious of the planet, a vast non-physical library of information, sometimes called the Akashic Record. This knowledge then seeps back into the awareness of the next cycle's inhabitants through dreams, intuition, and myth.
The geniuses and visionaries of our own history were not inventing new ideas from scratch. They were tapping into this ancient, resonant field of memory, remembering the lost sciences of a world that came before. Consciousness is the constant. Only its physical expression is temporary. This reinterprets sites like Göbekli Tepe in a new and chilling light. It may not be a memory palace from our direct ancestors, but a cyclical marker, a doomsday clock left behind by the previous iteration of humanity. Its purpose was to survive the planetary reset, to carry a single vital message from one cycle to the next. That message might be a warning about the cataclysm itself, encoded in the celestial alignments that track the 26,000-year precessional cycle, a rhythm that may be intimately tied to the planet's great resets. It is a message from one lost humanity to the next, a desperate attempt to break the cycle of forgetting. Where then does that place us? We are living in the late summer or early autumn of our own cycle. We are rediscovering the magic of the previous world. Quantum physics is, after all, a science of vibration and interconnectedness, while simultaneously creating technologies that give us the power to initiate our own reset event. The anomalies and whispers from the past are not just clues to a lost civilization, they are reminders of our own profound impermanence. They are evidence that the path we are on has been walked before, and that it leads with terrifying certainty to a great and silent winter
that will leave our own world as nothing more than a ghost in the ice for the next civilization to ponder. This cyclical model poses the ultimate and most pressing question: can the cycle be broken? Is it possible for one iteration of civilization to finally learn the lessons of the past, to heed the warnings left in stone, and to achieve a stable, enduring state of harmony with the planetary system? Or is the rise and fall, the bloom and decay, an immutable and necessary law of life on Earth? Are we destined to repeat the mistakes of our forgotten predecessors? Our great achievements ultimately serving only as the geological sediment for the world that will follow our own inevitable collapse? We are left in a state of profound and melancholy contemplation. The ghost in the ice ceases to be an archaeological curiosity and becomes a mirror. The silence we strain to hear from the chasm of deep time is not just the echo of a forgotten past, but a chilling premonition of our own future. The search for this lost world is, in the end, a search for ourselves, for a deeper understanding of our place in a story that is far older, far grander, and perhaps far more tragic than we have ever allowed ourselves to imagine. The final whisper from the ice is a simple one: as we are now, so once were they. As they are now, so we shall one day be. The discovery of this ghost in our past does not simply add a new chapter to the book of human history. It forces us to burn the book and begin again. The mirror in which we have always seen ourselves as the singular, miraculous inheritors of this planet's consciousness is now shattered. We are no longer the protagonists of a grand linear epic, marching steadily from stone to starlight. Instead, we find ourselves in a much stranger and more humbling story, a cyclical drama in which we may only be the latest actors to take the stage. Our sense of exceptionalism, the very foundation of our modern worldview, dissolves into the cold, clear water of a melted glacier, leaving us to gaze at a reflection we no longer recognize, a reflection that includes the faint, haunting outline of a face that came before our own. This realization brings with it a new and more profound form of loneliness. We once looked to the stars and felt the vast, cold emptiness of a silent universe, wondering if we were the only thinking beings. Now we understand we were never truly alone on our own world, and this knowledge is not a comfort, but a deeper sorrow. It is the loneliness of a survivor, the quiet ache of an orphan who has just discovered they once had a sibling they never knew, can never meet, and whose memory exists only as a faint scar on the skin of the planet. We are surrounded by the evidence of their absence, haunted by a presence defined only by its complete and total erasure. The silence of the cosmos feels less empty now, and more like a tomb. We must learn to see the Earth itself in a new light. It is not a passive stage for our dramas, nor a patient provider of resources. The planet is an active agent in its own story, a vast living archive that possesses a terrible and powerful delete function. The ice caps, the deep oceans, the shifting continents, these are not just geological features. They are the mechanisms of a planetary memory that periodically wipes itself clean. Our world is a library that is also a furnace, a cradle that is also a grave. To live on its surface is to accept that our story is being written on a page that can be torn out at any moment, our greatest achievements ground into dust by the slow, indifferent, and utterly magnificent power of the Earth's own deep cycles of forgetting and renewal. The weight of a cyclical history is a heavy one to bear.
The comforting idea of progress, of an ever upward climb toward a brighter future, is replaced by the unsettling rhythm of a great wheel, turning through seasons of civilization and ice. Every triumph of our science, every skyscraper that pierces the clouds, every line of code that connects our world, is now shadowed by a chilling question. Has this been done before? Are we simply rebuilding a structure that is destined to collapse? This is not a call to despair, but to a deeper kind of wisdom. It suggests that our ultimate purpose may not be to build higher or faster, but to somehow learn the one thing our predecessors apparently could not: how to step off the wheel before it turns once more into the inevitable, crushing winter. Our most ancient myths now rise from the realm of allegory and take their place as a form of fragmented, species-level memory. The stories of a golden age, of a time when humanity lived in harmony with the world, are no longer just wishful fantasies. They are the faint, distorted echoes of a different paradigm of existence. The near-universal tales of a great flood that wiped the world clean are not just metaphors for seasonal change.
They are the cultural scars of a very real, planetary-scale trauma, a memory of rising waters that submerged entire coastlines and drowned a world. We are the descendants of the amnesic survivors, and our oldest stories have been our only clues, a scattered handful of pages from a history we never knew we had lost, a lullaby that is also a warning. That final impossible message from 28,000 years ago, encoded in the very air trapped within the ice, changes everything. It is not an artifact we can hold, but an idea that now holds us. To receive a message from a civilization that is utterly gone is a profound and deeply melancholic experience. It is not a conversation, but an epitaph delivered across a chasm of deep time. It is the last will and testament of a ghost. The complex xenon isotopes and self-repairing polymers are the final indelible sentence of their story, a testament to a science so advanced it could write its memory into the very elements. We are now compelled to become archaeologists of the atmosphere, sifting through the frozen breath of a lost world, listening for a single, silent word. The future of exploration is forever changed. We are no longer simply charting our own past, but searching for the faint echoes of another. Every ice core drilled from the polar caps, every sonar scan of the deep abyssal plains, every descent into an unexplored cave system is now imbued with a new and sacred purpose. It is a search for the other, for the ghost that shares our timeline. Science itself must adapt, becoming not just a discipline of measurement and fact, but also one of listening, of attuning itself to the subtle dissonances in the geological record. The search for knowledge becomes a form of seance, a patient, humble attempt to commune with a presence that can no longer speak, but whose silence is now the most meaningful artifact we have ever found. Our relationship with our own technology must also be re-examined. The pride we feel in our achievements, our global communication networks, our mastery of genetics, our journey to the stars, is now tempered with a deep and unsettling humility. We see our creations not as the pinnacle of evolution, but as a potentially dangerous reflection of a power that may have preceded a great collapse. Is our relentless drive for technological advancement leading us toward enlightenment, or are we simply accelerating along a well-worn path that ends in erasure? The message in the ice serves as the ultimate cautionary tale, a quiet but persistent reminder that the greatest powers can be silenced by the even greater power of a planet that is breathing, living, and in its own time, forgetting. We are forced to imagine a new kind of ancestor, to expand our definition of what it means to be human. The familiar image of the primitive hunter-gatherer, huddled by a fire, is no longer the sole occupant of our deep past. We must now make room in our imagination for a different being, one of profound sophistication whose knowledge was not of a lesser kind, but of a different order entirely. A being who may have understood the resonant frequencies of the planet, the language of biology, or the geometry of light. This active imagination is not just an archaeological exercise, it fundamentally alters our perception of human potential. Perhaps our future does not lie in endless invention, but in a patient and profound act of remembering what our species has forgotten. In the end, it is the silence that remains. The great resonant silence that flows from the abyss of the Ice Age becomes a character in our story, perhaps the most important one of all. It is the silence of a library after the books have turned to ash, the silence of a coastline after the tide has receded to reveal a world no one was meant to see. It is the silence that our science, our myths, and our philosophies must now confront. We are a species born from that silence, and our destiny may be defined by how we choose to interpret it. Is it an empty void, a sign of our ultimate solitude, or is it a meditative quiet, an invitation to listen more closely to the subtle music of the earth and the faint, ghostly harmonies of a past we are only just beginning to hear?
The existence of a lost paradigm forces us to ask what consciousness truly is. We have assumed it to be a single, linear path of development, evolving from simple awareness to the complex, analytical thought that defines our modern world. But perhaps this is a profoundly limited view. Perhaps consciousness is more like a spectrum of light, and our civilization has only learned to see in one of its colors. The ghost civilization may have operated on a different frequency entirely, a mode of being rooted in intuition, symbiosis, and a direct, resonant connection to the planetary mind. Their erasure is not just the loss of a culture, but the loss of a different way to be human, a different way to know the universe, a lesson we may need to relearn. This entire narrative becomes a powerful meditation on the profound fragility of memory. If a civilization capable of atmospheric and molecular engineering can be so completely erased by the slow, grinding patience of geology, what does that say about our own legacy?
Our monuments of steel and concrete, our digital archives stored on fragile magnetic mediums, our entire global network of information, it all suddenly seems terrifyingly brittle. We write our history on the wind, confident in its permanence, while the planet itself keeps a much deeper, slower ledger. Time, we are reminded, does not just heal all wounds, it eventually erases all traces, reminding us that to exist is to be in a constant losing battle against the forces of forgetting. The final and perhaps most important implication is a call for a new and radical humility. We are not the masters of this planet, nor are we the ultimate expression of its potential. We are temporary residents, living on a thin, fragile layer of habitable time, a brief and gentle summer between long, crushing winters. This realization need not be a source of fear, but of profound wisdom. It encourages a more respectful, more attentive relationship with the earth, which is both our cradle and our potential tomb. By understanding our own impermanence, we may finally learn to live more lightly, more gratefully upon a world that has hosted stories far grander and more ancient than our own, and will likely host many more after ours is gone. We are left standing before an open door, a doorway into a history far deeper and stranger than we ever conceived. We have found the undeniable proof of the ghost, but we do not know its name, its face, or the contents of its heart. The mystery of its existence has been solved, only to reveal a far more profound and existential one about our own destiny. Are we capable of learning from the silence? Can we heed the warning written in the ice and forge a different path for ourselves? Or are we bound to the great wheel, fated to become the next ghost in the timeline, the next silent chapter for a future world to uncover? The story does not end with an answer, but with a question that we must now live. The story of our world is a book with missing pages, its most important chapters perhaps forever lost to time. If you feel compelled to search for these pages, to listen for the whispers between the lines of accepted history, then continue this journey with us. The questions we ask define the reality we inhabit, and the greatest mysteries are the ones that reshape our understanding of ourselves. By exploring these forgotten chapters together, we keep the spirit of inquiry alive, ensuring that we never stop searching for the full story of who we are, where we came from, and what we might one day become. We began with a question, a search for a whisper in the ice. We sought the ghost of a lost chapter, hoping to fill the unnerving silence in our own story. But the answer we found is not a story of a forgotten people. It is a mirror reflecting our own profound impermanence. The message in the ice confirms that we were not the first, but it offers no names, no history, no comfort. The silence has not been broken, it has only been given weight. It is no longer the silence of an empty room, but the quiet of a tomb, a testament to a consciousness so vast and powerful that its only remaining monument is its complete and total absence. We have not solved a mystery, but have instead been invited into a much deeper and more humbling state of contemplation, standing at the edge of a history that is not entirely our own. This journey forces us to see the Earth itself in a new and formidable light. It is not a passive stage for our civilization, but an active, living archivist with a terrifyingly efficient method of curation. The slow, grinding advance of glaciers, the patient rise of the oceans, the relentless turning of tectonic plates, these are not random geological events. They are the planet's instruments of forgetting, the tools it uses to wipe its own memory clean, to prepare the canvas for a new creation. Our own world, with its cities of glass and steel and its digital universe of fleeting information, suddenly seems impossibly fragile. We write our history on a page that the Earth can and will eventually turn, reminding us that memory is not a monument, but a wave that crests and inevitably collapses back into the silent, timeless ocean. And so the straight line of progress upon which we have built our entire worldview shatters into the recurring pattern of a great wheel.
We are not the pinnacle of a grand ascent, but merely the inhabitants of the current season, a brief, warm summer between long, crushing winters of ice. This realization does not have to be a source of despair, but can be a call to a deeper wisdom. The ancient universal myths of a golden age destroyed by a flood cease to be simple fables and become what they may have always been, a form of inherited, species-level trauma, the faint, dreaming memory of the last turn of the wheel. We are the children of the survivors, the descendants of an amnesia so profound that we mistook the dawn for the beginning of time itself, unaware that our world is built upon the dust of a forgotten autumn. The faint signal from 28,000 years ago is therefore not an ending, but a new beginning. It is not an answer, but the ultimate question posed to our civilization. Knowing that a great intelligence has risen and fallen before, what do we do now? How does this knowledge change the way we live, the way we dream, the way we reach for the stars? The search is no longer for what was lost, but for what can be learned. Perhaps the purpose of our existence, the great test of our own cycle, is to become the first iteration to finally heed the warning, to understand the planet's deep rhythms, and to find a way to achieve a harmony that allows us to step off the wheel. The ghost of the past has given us the greatest possible gift, a chance to choose a different future. As we drift into the quiet of this moment, we are left suspended between two vast silences. Behind us, the cold, profound silence of a world erased. Ahead of us, the unknown silence of our own future. The questions left by the ghost in the ice will not be answered in laboratories or dig sites, but in the choices we make, in the consciousness we cultivate. Who were they? A human culture that took a different path? A celestial gardener tending to a nascent world? The answer may be forever lost, but a more urgent question now echoes in the quiet of the night, a whisper carried not from the ice, but from within. Are we listening closely enough to the story of our planet to avoid becoming the next faint whisper, the next impossible anomaly, the next ghost in the ice?